I should first welcome you. Nice to meet you. And I think we are interacting face to face for the first time. And let me welcome you. You are the president of the Global Alliance for Tibet and Persecuted Minorities.
The proper name is Global Alliance for Tibet and Tibet, not Tibetan. Global Alliance for Tibet and Persecuted Minorities.
Minorities.
Yeah.
So you are currently president of the organization.
Well, we don't use the word president here. We use, I'm the founder and chairman.
Okay. Founder and chairman of the organization. First of all, I believe that you will be protesting on March 10 as Uprising Day. So what are you expecting?
The 10th March is the annual anniversary. It's a commemoration event.
Yes.
And it's basically keeping alive the Tibetan freedom struggle.
Yes.
That's the 10th of March. That's the commemoration every year. So this year, 2022, 10th of March, is the 63rd commemoration event.
So do you think your activism across the world, not your organization, but the Tibetans' activism all around the world, is getting you anywhere?
In our Tibetan freedom struggle, our exile situation is like 63 years this year.
Yes.
And to one extent, it's over 6 decades, it's a long period.
Yes.
In terms of freedom struggle movement, it may not be that long, to be honest.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately for Tibetans, our opponent or our enemy or foe or challenger, whatever you want to call it, it's a big country, China, People's Republic of China. Yes. And regime believes only in brutal repression, brutal suppression. Yes. They only knows about guns and tanks. Okay. So, however, Tibetans, because of our leadership, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and because of Buddhism, Buddhism came from India to Tibet, and Tibetans are very much pacified. So our road for freedom of struggle is following the path of non-violence means, and especially under the leadership of His Holiness the present 14th Dalai Lama. So our freedom struggle has been, in terms of continuity, is still there, but in terms of actual achievement, the political resolution, as you asked the question, we haven't achieved it yet.
So what are the steps do you think you must take now, or your friends around the world should take now, that you can scale up your non-violent struggle ahead?
Obviously, since Dalai Lama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989, yes. The Tibetan freedom struggle has very much come brought into the international platform. Yeah. In the 90s and in the early 20s, 2000s, we have a lot of attention from public, governments around the world, NGOs, and that time Dalai Lama was able to travel to so many countries. Okay. Now the current situation is, one is China is getting very much smarter, and they have lots of resources, especially foreign currency in their sort of reserves, and they have managed to buy so much influence. For example, in Africa, it's a big country, like 54, 56 countries, and anything China wanted in the UN, any UN bodies, all the countries support China's motion. So that level of influence China has managed to secured, not only in Africa, but also in South America, Latin America, and countries around the world. So that is a challenge for the Tibetans, and also some persecuted communities like, Uyghur Muslims that we are trying to basically face the Chinese regime. And however, the recent, especially after the COVID-19 coronavirus, pandemic, which sort of originated from Wuhan in China. Obviously, there are lots of controversy surrounding the origins and whether it was manufacturing or that's one thing. But basically, I think the world has woken up after the pandemic, and especially China's, especially under the, Xi Jinping's leadership, China's exertion of global so-called Belt and Road Initiative, but is basically a strategy to expand China countries, globally, and it has woken off especially the Western countries led by America, USA, and now there is a big challenge between communist values and communist socialist value and Western liberal and democracy values. So there is this big challenge. Now, Tibetans, since coming into exile, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, even before he fled Tibet in 1959, he tried to reform Tibet. Obviously, past Tibet wasn't that glory, to be honest with you. That was, I think in any society that happens. But Dalai Lama has, tried to reform the Tibetan society. He was a very, very young boy or young man, that time. And he was always, I would call a reformer, and bring in good governance for the people. And after coming into exile, he started, after setting up the Tibetan government in exile, now it's called the Central Tibet Administration, and introduced democracy in the Tibetan community step by step. So, we are, following or adopted a democracy. And I think democracies around the world, it's time, it's, if you want to preserve us community, who are really trying to, nurture and appreciate democracy, I think it's time, countries around the world come and support us. But it is taking time, to be very honest with you, because of China's, big power and influence.
That there is this unholy nexus between Pakistan, China, and in the growth of China and today's almost destroyed economy of Pakistan. Behind that is the United States of America. We all know what happened during the Russian incursion of Afghanistan, and then what happened, how China grew today because of the outsourcing from USA. Even for that matter, the COVID research was outsourced to China by American companies. Now, how do you see the hypocrisy of United States of America affecting the real democratic processes of the world?
I mean, in regards to China's presence in Pakistan, and we know the history between Pakistan and India, 1947, we know that. Yes. And China will always do anything with any countries or organizations or, anyone, use those parties to basically challenge India. And we know this, and they will, and they have resources available, and they will. It's a political decision for them. So once a country has a political decision, they will do anything. So and the political will is there as well, especially in Xi Jinping's regime, and that's one thing. And Pakistan is said to be the best ally, perhaps, for China, especially to contain or challenge India. Now, America, obviously the champion of democracy, and obviously, as you said, we heard about, for example, the situation in Afghanistan last year,
yes,
pulling out, and it has caused, issues around the world. Everybody has said it.
yes.
I think for Tibetans as well, back in the 60s, and early 70s, when Taiwan was recognized by Washington, and then after Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger's new report with Mao Zedong, and things changed, and they gave the status to China, basically to challenge. Basically, is a third player against Soviet Union. And I think, unfortunately, whichever way, top people in Washington or anywhere, they perhaps thinking for short-term gain. And I think the return is basically, now we know what China is doing against the United States. We know South China Sea. We know Indo-Pacific region. And now Washington has really dedicated that region is, in the next 20, 30, 40, even 50 years, or perhaps longer. So there is this big, what do you call it, diversion of resources to contain or challenge China. And I think today's China is basically making all Western countries. That's how I see it.
Yes.
I think maybe for that reason, India is quite careful with Western countries. I don't know. What I see today is many Western powers are really, engaging India very closely, and India somehow has really, because this is the biggest democracy in the world, 1.3 billion population, and such a big, country, and culturally diverse, language is amazing, and rich history and culture in Buddhism, Muslim, Hinduism, Christians, every, there's people living, amazingly in diversity. I mean, one thing, small things happen here and there in any society. That's one thing. But in bigger level, it's amazing what India provides and accommodates. People can enjoy. So I think maybe perhaps India is trying to be careful. Now, in regards to Tibet, I would say India has to be a little bit more assertive. And obviously, as the Western countries, whether it's London or Brussels or Washington, trying to entertain India so that it can challenge China altogether, I think, for India, the northern border, before it was Tibet, Indo-Tibet border, now it's always like a China border. Yeah. So I think India can be more assertive and when working with these major capitals, in Washington, London, or Brussels, or even other countries. Okay. I think Tibet issue needs to be highlighted, and it is also India's own security, I think, interest as well, because as you know, before Tibet was invaded by the Chinese regime, yes, there were hardly any border patrols, maybe one or two, there were hardly. And people living in the border region, they can freely, cross the borders and do trading, there was peace and harmony, nothing. Now, since Tibet was taken over by the Chinese Communist Party or the regime, today we know, frequent incursions between two sides, and look, tens of thousands of troops, fully armed on both sides. Yes. If there were any sort of misunderstanding, that could be very, very chaotic. And this is something we don't want to see, to be honest with you. I think for this very reason, Dalai Lama proposed a middle way approach. This is a very, very long-term thinking. I think it is good, obviously good for Tibetans, so that we can maintain our own culture, religion, live, in peace and harmony. But at the same time, no bloodshed for the Chinese side, for the Indian side. Right. So I think really India can be more proactive in that front, as helping the Tibetans, and also securing its own security interests. We have this, whatever you want to call it, buffer zone, or buffer state or whatever, so that we enjoy our friendship, continued friendship.
Yes. So do you think that China, Tibet, and India should sit together and come to an amicable settlement about this thing?
I think it is also own interest for Beijing as well as New Delhi. I think there's nothing wrong with perhaps appointing a special coordinator or something like that in New Delhi, whether it's the Foreign Office desk or wherever, wherever it is appropriate. Basically, that office is dedicated to finding, just like Washington, in the U.S. State Department, there is a special U.S. special coordinator for Tibet.
Okay.
I think New Delhi could really start that, and work and focus really, and trying to bring a really tangible. It may take time. I think we need to build trust from all parties. But I think this is the interest of the Tibetan government in exile, or what we call a central Tibet administration. And this is Dalai Lama's, his wish. He doesn't want any bloodshed. Because of Dalai Lama, I think today Tibetan freedom struggle is very much, what do you call it, peaceful. And Dalai Lama is, he's in his mid-80s. One day when he's no more with us, God knows what the situation could be like, for the Tibetan. Yes. And that could be something not favorable for Washington, New Delhi, and even for the Tibetans. So I think we really can do something now when the Dalai Lama is still alive.
Yes, and we really have, I think we have very little precious time to waste. We can't waste time now because we'll have to work hard and try to resolve. This is the right time to actually rethink our policies, rework our policies. And now 2 quick answers I would require because we are short of time. One is, what is going to be the impact of the development, almost listless development which China is doing on the in Tibet, on environment and natural resources? One. The second thing is, what are the 2 things you suggest which will catapult the Tibetan cause to a higher, level of energy?
I mean, China invaded Tibet because it wants the Tibetan land, the Tibetan plateau, because Tibet's natural resources were never exploited. I think it's primarily because of Buddhist, principles.
Yes.
You only consume what you need, not what you want.
Yes.
I think so. I think that's China knows perfectly, what is inside Tibet. They have exploited many natural resources. Now we know the rivers again. The water. It's called the Asia's water towers, and there's also even I think Chinese scientists, they said the third pole, the Tibet snow-capped mountains, and the water diversion from Tibetan to more China's hinterland. Instead of letting it flow naturally to the downstream, like India, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Laos, and so on. So by doing so, it has big implications. Over 1 billion, nearly 2 people's populations in the South Asia. So I think that is going to be detrimental if China continues and strengthens. And obviously they have built and continue to build hundreds of dams, across various rivers which originate from Tibet. And I think China needs to be more mindful about that because nature, you can't do what you want just like that. I think it's very, very obviously selfish way and morally corrupt. And I think that front, I think again Asia can play a greater role with like-minded countries, and then take the issues at the UN level, because at these days, China is trying to play play more role in global platforms.
Yeah, you said you said that Tibet's position in the world should be treated more on a higher level. Like you want an embassy to be made rather than a.
Yeah, coming back to your second question, which how to sort of put this Tibet on a international stage.
Yes.
I think it is high time now. When Dalai Lama is his age is advancing. We want to see a really peaceful resolution.
Right.
I think one thing. This is how I see it. For Tibetans, India, the Indian government, successive Indian governments, and the public are such a amazing help at a time of greatest need, and we know India's security concerns, and as I mentioned earlier, it is Dalai Lama's wish to bring a peace on the Tibetan plateau. For that very reason, he shunned the idea of independence and trying to live side by side with China, while respecting the Chinese constitution. I think this is where China needs to be more accommodable and respect its own constitution, the Chinese regime. I think if there is that will and understanding, I cannot see why Tibet issue cannot be resolved, peacefully. I think for that, now I think there are different ways to do it.
Yes.
For example, some years ago, I can't remember the exact year, but some years ago, when China was refusing to talk to Dharamsala, European Union said that if you do not engage with the Tibetan Israel leadership, they were going to recognize the Tibetan government, Central Tibet Minister is the Tibetan government in exile, and that prompted them to engage. And although sort of 9-10 rounds of dialogues took place between Beijing and Dharamsala, but nothing concrete came out of it. But I think that was a good clarification of misunderstanding on either parties. Now, what lives behind is that political will to resolve the issue, I believe. And I think for that to push, again, as at a time when Washington, London, major Western I think it is time India take up the Tibet case and say these countries, democracies, if China doesn't engage with the Dharamsala, we're going to recognize Tibetan government in exile. We're going to shun the idea of one China policy. I think these would really help. And then also these countries like London, Britain, America, New Delhi, recognize the Office of Tibet as the embassy of the Tibet government in exile. I think that would give some sort of leverage.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Oh, something happened?
Yes. Yeah, I think, we are, now the time is getting over. So I think we have covered almost all the questions which we thought of covering. Excellent talking to you.